All right. Well, welcome in to another episode of the IAC Podcast. I'm Travis Howe. With me is my IAC partner in crime, Doug Wildermuth. And tonight, special guest, Eric Bauer, president of FlightBridgeEd. Gents, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Oh, I'm
Wonderful.
good. It's holidays are here. I've done zero shopping. I'm not prepared, and it's going to snow a foot tonight. It's
You have nothing to worry about from what I've been hearing with you. Santa's not bringing you anything anyway.
that's true. That's probably true.
Yeah.
But hey, Eric, welcome. I appreciate you coming on, and you're in a different time zone, so this takes some coordination.
Yeah, we're just an hour behind you. I appreciate you inviting me, and excited to get to talk to you guys and meet you formally. We've definitely exchanged many emails.
Yeah, absolutely. And the original intent, of course, was to get you up to IAC 2020, which, of course, we had to postpone and then cancel due to the pandemic. But we got you on the schedule for IAC 2021, coming up with FlightBridgeEd to do a mechanical ventilation course and a couple of lectures on top of that. So, hopefully we can get you up here, in May is what we're shooting for, May 5th through the 9th. So what about that mechanical ventilation course? Because it's one that as we've tried to expand a little bit into, especially the critical care medicine world, for some of our attendees. What does that look like? What does that encompass, and what can they expect out of the course?
The way we run the course, and the course has evolved over a few years. I've tried to change based on what I've seen from the providers and the feedback. And so the way that I do it now is that we will get a list of actual attendees that are going to take the course. We'll issue them all licenses to our FlightBridgeEd University, and we'll have them do some pre-course content. And so what that does is that frees us up to really focus on the hands-on part. And so I'll bring multiple ventilators, and we'll break them up into groups and put them into teams. And we go through about 5 critical care level cases. I truly believe that you can teach mechanical ventilation from the standpoint of tidal volume and rate and ID ratio and putting your hands on the vent. But what I've seen over the years as an educator, as an education manager, when I was with Air Methods, is taking those concepts and then applying it to patient care is completely different. And when they get into the ICU on these really high acute patients, a lot of times they're so sick and there's so many other factors involved that they don't even know where to start. And they can definitely make mistakes based on their differential, their ABGs, labs, or maybe lack thereof. And so we've built these cases to really focus on areas that I've seen repetitively from a mistake standpoint. I think that's what we really have to always go back on. If you continuously see the same mistakes or the same deficiencies, then there's obviously an education gap. And so that's where I focused those cases. We give the case. The case includes everything from their past medical history, their overall complaint, chest X-ray. There's ABGs. There's labs. There's lots of different stuff thrown at each team, and then they're given a time limit, right? We don't want 2-hour bedside times. So I give them usually 20 to 30 minutes based on the case, and they have to, by that 30-minute mark, they have to have the vent operating. We have actual pig lungs that are set up, and so the vent is hooked to pig lungs. They can see, if they apply 20 a PEEP, because this patient is in ARDS and they're severely hypoxic, they can see what that does if they choose to go to inverse ID ratios, or if they have a Hamilton and they go APRV, they can see what that does visually. And that, I think that it imprints that in your mind when you see that over and over and over. So we have adapted the course to be more of a team-based approach. I'm able to teach the class by myself because of that. I can walk around and I can facilitate discussion with the teams. I can sit there at their tables and kind of guide them in the right area. I can ask them questions. and it really puts the emphasis back on them to make those clinical decisions.
Hey, Eric, let me ask you a question. You know, 20 plus years being a nationally registered medic, I remember being a lot younger, using ventilators on a regular basis. Maybe not so much anymore. And I'm sure there's plenty of providers that don't do that critical care transport, but are interested in a little bit more of that high tech, not only high tech, but a lot of the intricacies nowadays compared to when I used to do it about ventilators and transport. What would you tell those potential students that or participants in your program that are thinking about it or sitting on the fence about jumping into this program? Is it going to be that simple to learn? Is there a lot of legwork behind it, as you kind of insinuated? But what can we tell those providers that might be thinking about participating in your program?
No, great question. This is my 29th year in EMS. It's not my 29th year as a paramedic, but I definitely don't remember when I became a paramedic. We never dealt with ventilators. We never even had auto vents back then. We bagged our patients. But times have changed, and we know that the HIMSS air medical environment has trickled down to, we are seeing from the FlightBridgeEd side, we have dozens and dozens of ground transport agencies that have progressed to critical care. They may have multiple providers that are critical care. Some of them have expanded to they're all critical care. So I definitely feel like that is the future. There's definitely a lot of patient transports where air medical is not available. We have rural areas where these ground agencies have long transport times, and they have to become efficient in mechanical ventilation. So what I would say is that you start from the basics. The first book I wrote, Ventilator Management, a Pre-Hospital Perspective, was written off of, again, deficiencies that I saw over and over and over and over. And so I wrote it from a very basic standpoint. And it's a very foundational book. I always say, read that book first. Some people say they've had to read it 3 or 4 times. And so you read that. And then the way I learned mechanical ventilation was literally reading, touching the vent, reading, touching the vent. And I think that is where I really see the discrepancy is when I go and I do trainings or I talk to individuals. I think you have 10% of the people out there that are obsessive and they want to learn, and that's all they focus on, and they really become immersed in that subject. And mechanical ventilation is definitely that subject. You have to. There's no other way around it. I try to be as gentle as I can saying this, but you have to. It's a high acute, low occurrence call in a lot of areas. And so if you're only touching the vent once every month, you're never going to become sufficient in the inner workings or the understanding of the vent. And so even 30 minutes a shift, an hour a shift, putting your hands on it, turning it on, going through the modes, going through the back menus, trying to test yourself. Guys, the way I learned it is I put a CPAP mask on myself and I applied it to myself, and I would put it in assist control and I would turn the trigger off. I'd put it in a SIV and I would turn the pressure support up and down. I would add PEEP. I would change the ID ratio. And that helped me kind of imprint those different maneuvers into my mind. And then I would have a patient flight and I would apply those areas. But it took a lot of work. It didn't happen overnight. And I'm still learning. And so it's an evolutionary process. And you got to think of it from this perspective is we have the respiratory therapy degree. We have registered respiratory therapists that's all they do. And unfortunately, from the air medical and critical care ground transport side, respiratory therapists aren't predominantly in our environment. And so, but we still have to take care of these high acute patients. It's a big responsibility. So I just think you just got to take it in small chunks. You got to start from the basics. You got to keep building on your knowledge and become obsessive about it, because it really is an area that can make a difference in a patient, especially now with the COVID stuff going on.
That's awesome. Thank you for that excellent answer. And I'm a huge believer as well about kinesthetic learning and making sure that you can get your hands on stuff. And I think that's brilliant. how you brought it along, and I'm glad you asked or told us about some of the respiratory therapists on your team, because I'm sure that's going to be a question coming up when we talk about FlightBridge.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of comments. Look at Mike Verkest is on there. Look at that. I mean, you were wanting to host. There he is. So, no, Mike can attest to this. He is somebody that has been one of our instructors. He's been one of my best friends for over 20 years, and he can tell you from the ground side, from the fire side, that and his comment of so many people don't have solid foundation, so the ongoing issues reflect that. It starts with a base foundation. It starts with understanding the physiology of our lungs and gas exchange and cellular respiration. It really goes into all those little areas. And that's why I developed the course, or I should say, evolved the course. If you go back 4 years ago and took this course, it was a completely different course. We would break out into stations. I would have to have multiple instructors, and you would have 5 people in a group. You'd have maybe 2 touching the vent or doing something, and the other 3 would be standing back, more timid, not wanting to do anything. And I just felt like that wasn't the vision I had. You got to have people touching the vent. You got to force them to do that. And so that's where the case studies really come in. And I think it's a safer environment, right? They're working in small groups, and I can deal with the groups one-on-one. And it's been very, very popular. Really, any of the conferences that we have put this at, whether that's been at FAST, I mean, you look at the registration for FAST 21 right now, pre-conference wise, it has blown all the other pre-conference away, and it sells out everywhere we go, because I think, just as you're saying, people know it's a deficiency. It is a scary thing when you first are given a ventilator.
Eric, we have a question here. You mentioned a book. You may have a couple different books out there, but what was the name of the book? Looks like our friend Nick Adams was able to post a link there, but do you want to talk about the book, or maybe the latest text out of FlightBridgeEd?
Yeah, and I'll probably use Mike. With Mike, if you're still on there, if you could post the link to the first book, Ventilator Management, a Pre-Hospital Perspective. That's book number 1. It was published in 2015. And then the second book I co-wrote with Tyler Christofoli, and we published that last December. So it's been about out a year, and that is more of an intermediate to advanced concepts type book, going into some of the different areas that we constantly got questions about, and diving into some of the subjects that are covered in the first book, but not to the level that really I felt was needed in that first book. I felt like we'd get lost. And so, I definitely say read book 1 before read book 2, but they definitely are written in two different mindsets.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we got a question here from our friend Maris. Maris, I hope you guys are doing well. Definitely can't wait to see you guys. And she asks, are we expecting IAC 2021 to be virtual or in person? Too early to see. That's a great question. Doug and I are thinking in a positive manner. Obviously, we have to see how the vaccine rollout goes, but we're thinking positively. Do we have some sort of backup plan? Sure. The one thing I will say, my perspective on the virtual stuff, and there's some great stuff going on virtually right now. The refresh stuff that's being put on by a bunch of great people around the country is reaching a lot of people. There's a lot of good content out there. FlightBridgeEd obviously is putting out good stuff. Foam Frat's putting out good stuff. There's a lot of good virtual online content. And one of the reasons we decided not to go virtual with IAC 2020 is we don't feel like that's what IAC is about. We really want that human connection. We want people there in person. We feel like there's a lot of good content online. So we are holding out for an in-person event. I can tell you that. And doesn't mean we wouldn't do something maybe smaller on the side, but we are shooting for May 5th through the 9th, and we're going to stay positive, right, Doug?
Absolutely. And I saw a couple comments in the box about how beautiful Lake Placid is and what have you. But right now we're still orienting around Glens Falls. There's a lot of variables and logistics that are preventing us from going back to Lake Placid this year. But don't think for a second that we're not looking there again. Everything's being evaluated, and believe you me, Travis, the man right there, he looks at everything 8 ways till Sunday. So we will deliver you the best possible option. I guarantee it.
You mean I'll drive you nuts, basically, is what you're saying.
Hey, whichever way you want to sugarcoat it.
So Eric, I want to ask you, so FlightBridgeEd, you guys, you've been in business as a company, what, since 2012?
Yeah, 2012.
So what, I think you've got quite the reach. I see, a lot of buzz. You're doing a lot of amazing things. Your in-person classes, your online stuff, podcasts. I think maybe within the FlightBridgeEd podcast network, you're maybe up to 5 different podcasts. Kind of take us through how you came to start the company and your motivation for that, and then maybe give us the overview of how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, I'll try to explain it the best I can. I definitely feel like a lot of things happened for the right reasons. And what I mean by that is that I never went into this from the mindset of a business. And I truly mean that. This was never my initial vision was never as a business. I was very inspired by the MCRIT podcast, and I was a very early listener of the podcast, and really that was the only first podcast I listened to, and then I started listening to the ICU rounds by Dr. Jeff Guy at Vanderbilt, and something resonated with me with Scott Weingart, and it was he kept saying in those early podcasts is taking upstairs care downstairs, and I had already been toying with some type of idea. I didn't really know what it was. I was teaching all over Tennessee, Kentucky, in multiple facets, and getting good responses, getting a lot of requests through my flight job. And so, really, I had moved. I met my wife, future wife, and I moved up to her area. Took a job with Air Methods, and kind of the stars aligned. I took this idea to. I talked to Ashley about it. She supported me, and really, it wasn't until I met Evan Claunch, and Evan Claunch was a fellow flight paramedic at Kentucky 8 in Glasgow, Kentucky, and we were on opposite shifts, and we were like two peas in a pod. I mean, we were immediately had a connection. We were able to talk. He had an IT background, kind of self-taught IT background, and he encouraged me to kind of follow through with that. So we decided we were going to start a podcast. He was going to handle the whole IT infrastructure. At that point, there was not companies out there that did podcast publishing. There wasn't, WordPress, Libsyn. There wasn't those platforms. So he actually hand coded and built us a media platform. He built our initial website. He built the RSS feed. So I definitely would not, FlightBridgeEd would not be FlightBridgeEd without Evan Claunch. And I say that over and over. I don't think people understand how much he invested in the initial vision of FlightBridgeEd. We named the company together and started. So I didn't really know anything about audio, and I didn't know anything about anything, and just started learning as I went. He did all the editing of the podcast for quite some time. And, we just started putting out content. I think that's the key is I put out content religiously every 2 weeks, sometimes every week, but I stuck to that schedule no matter what. And it slowly started going. Well, fast forward about 4 months after the first podcast, started getting some emails, started seeing some positive messages, and started getting asked multiple times, hey, do you teach critical care review courses? No, I don't. But, again, from the business side, I went to Ashley, my wife, and I said, hey, why don't we write a curriculum, write a course, write a book? And we did. And we scheduled our first class in Dallas, Texas in June of 13. We were able to write all that within that 4-month span and got it out. And traveled to Dallas and was scared to death. And I think we had 15 students that first class, and did the second class in Alabama the next month, had 65 people in the class, and just kept putting out podcasts, kept working clinically, both of us. She's a nurse practitioner. I think she had graduated at that point and was working in the ED, and I was still flying full time, and just religiously kept putting out content. And we would do about 12 classes a year. After that first year, I think we went to 8 classes in 14, 12 classes in 15 and 16. And it wasn't until 2017, the podcast had really, really grown. We were at about 150,000 downloads every 90 days at that point. So it really was it was really booming. We had obviously started the Second Shift podcast. Mike Request and I did that in late 2014, I think. And it came to the point where I had to make a decision in 2017. I was getting so many requests for live courses that I literally was either on the road with Air Methods. I was in a clinical manager position in Denver at that time, or I was on the road on a review class. And I was just getting killed. So I finally made the choice at that point to leave Air Methods from a full-time perspective. I was able to go back as a PRN flight paramedic, and that really was the decision, I think, that got us to where we're at today. I was able to put 100% of my time into it and kept putting out the content. Mike kept putting out content. At that point, we moved to where Ritu Sani and him took over the Second Shift podcast, and went from doing 12 review classes a year to that 2017, I did 32. And then I did another from the conference speaking and the review classes. I think I had 48 dates. And it just kept growing. And we really tried to always have the mission as putting out the content through the podcast. Right? That was the most important part, is we felt like that was what built the company. And I feel like that's what built FlightBridgeEd, was building the listenership. At its peak, it was doing about 240,000 downloads every 90 days, and it was rated number 6 in the world. Yeah, it was unbelievable. So, we definitely we're 100% indebted to the listeners. And we feel like once we started the FlightBridgeEd University in 2018, which again I got to give credit to my wife and to Mike Request. They pushed me. They kept telling me for years that we needed to do an online course, and I was very against it, because I feel like that person-to-person interaction, that live interaction, is so important. But they were right. I finally did that. We recorded all that stuff in the end of 17 and published it in 18, and it has been a game changer. So, we really have grown by listening to the industry, by listening to the customer. The ventilator book was completely because of what I saw with the industry and getting the emails and asking me those questions. I'm like, well, why don't I just try to write a book, and try to answer those questions? And so I think that's business. I realized how much or how little I didn't know about business. I got my bachelor's in business, got my master's in business, through this whole time. My wife went back and got an MBA as well, because you realize really quickly that now you have this company and you don't know anything. You're just,
you need a support structure.
Yeah. So, we just have added amazing people. We have been very selective on adding staff. We've been very small. Mike was the first person we added.
Can I ask you further about that? I read the story online and I did a little research, and I was completely amazed. So when Travis asked the question, I'm like, yes, get to learn more. But that said, what's your staff like? I mean, some people might be asking more about FlightBridgeEd and thinking, is it a 24 to 100 employee thing, or what? How do you get it structured a little bit?
No, I mean, like I said, for the first 70 classes, review classes, it was just Ashley and I. That's it. To this point, we're 8 years in. I've never not taught a review class. I've taught every one of them.
It's devotion.
Well, It's craziness is what it is. The reason why is we we didn't have we didn't have we didn't have people that could just give up their jobs and devote. So we had to have somebody dedicated to every class. And then there's classes I've taught by myself. There's obviously taught a lot of them with Ashley. And then when Mike came on in 2015 from an instructor standpoint, he jumped in with 2 feet. And in 16, I mean, we were all over. I mean, we were teaching 3 weeks out of the year or out of the month. It was nuts. And maybe that was 17, but it was crazy. And so it was Ashley and myself, and then Mike, and then we added Bruce Hoffman. Bruce Hoffman was introduced to us on a podcast through a mutual friend, and I loved his ability to articulate and to speak, and he's very well educated, and he's so polite, and that relationship just slowly blossomed. He came on as an independent contractor from an operational standpoint in 17, and I started handing him. So that's where I started handing him a lot of stuff I was doing on a day-to-day basis. Ashley took over all the finance side, and so we just started growing. So now we had myself, we had Ashley, Mike, and Bruce, and then obviously had medical director. Dan Davis was our first medical director, and that really did a lot with us. And then we added a full-time person in the office in the beginning of 2019, and her name is Emily Baker. She is still with us. She is the backbone of FlightBridgeEd, and came to us and has jumped in with 2 feet. And I'm sure you both have emailed her back and forth, and
she's on the ball. She's on the ball.
I'm telling you, she's super young. She's 25 or just turned 26, but she really has had to learn a lot really fast. Not coming in as a flight nurse or flight paramedic and knowing that industry, she's had to really learn really fast, and she is what keeps us going on a day-to-day basis. I mean, if you're going to talk to somebody on a day-to-day basis, it's going to be Emily. So very indebted to her, and she's done amazing. And then obviously Evan. So if we go back to Evan, he was part owner for the first part. He left and did some other things, and then he just recently came back as a full-time employee, and is our director of strategy and information systems. And I mean, he always has a spot here. So, and then we just keep adding people. But as far as our first conference, it was planned and ran with 5 people.
Yeah.
And so we've always kept it very intimate, very small, and Mike has maintained the IT or the marketing and social media side for quite a few years. Now he's bridged off into more of a podcast production, running that whole division, running the video production side, and doing an amazing job there. So.
Well, that's one of the things I wanted to point out. And I'm loving the podcast, the EMS Lighthouse, the new standard of care, just really, really good content. If you guys haven't checked out, I think is it 5? I think it's 5 total podcasts under the network. Really good stuff. And one of the things too that I've noticed just listening to you talk and getting to know some of these people is you truly have honed in on quality people, and being careful about who you're adding to the company and that inner circle. But just, couple other takeaways, I think, for anybody who's looking to just start with something, whether it's a podcast, whether it's a company, whether, it's an advancement in their career. It's what I got from you is you just started. I mean, it's well thought out, but you just started, and then you grind, and when you add people, you surround yourself with good people and smart people. And, when you do that, when you surround yourself with those people, good things happen. So,
Yeah,
Truly a
I,
remarkable
I,
journey.
I I agree. Yeah, it has been it's been definitely a blessing. It's been a lot of hard work. A lot of travel. I mean, I can't tell you how much. Well, I've almost flown 1 million miles in the last, and the majority of that has been in the last 3 years. So but it's super rewarding. I've gotten to meet so many people. I've gotten to travel all over the world. Our team has had got to gain such a perspective from the EMS, the HIM side. Mike can tell you that. I mean, just the perspective that each team member can bring back to their individual area has been super valuable as well. So, yeah, I mean, we have an amazing team, and it goes back to, and I say this: there's any successful person, you have that partner next to you, and you know, Ashley never. This wasn't her dream or her idea. There's been many times she's been frustrated. She has had to sacrifice. We have had to be apart. I mean, last year I was in a hotel 230 days. So, th- but she has supported us. She has jumped in with 2 feet. She got her MBA.
That's
Now she's a
awesome.
VP of operations. So I couldn't have done it without her support. I couldn't have done it without Evan. I couldn't have done it without Mike. It takes a tribe. It really does. And um, at some point, you got to realize. And so at this point in our company, obviously, we sold FlightBridgeEd, and that was something again I never ever expected to happen. But I'm still the president of FlightBridgeEd. I'm still running FlightBridgeEd. FlightBridgeEd is not going to change at all. We're still FlightBridgeEd, and we're still operating as we always have. Our team is completely intact. Um, but I've recognized that our team is super talented, and that's why I really try to step back and let them run things, and they're doing an amazing job.
Well, here's something. Our buddy Mike Verkest, who you're talking about, he says you guys taught the first ever critical care course over 5 days in Ecuador. First one ever in South America. That is absolutely amazing. Just goes
Yeah,
to show you the reach that you have at FlightBridge Ed. Really amazing.
yeah. It makes I've seen this written. That makes the world small.
Yeah.
Right, the world is so big, but it makes the world small. And I
Mm.
think you get to meet so many people, and you realize that we're all the same. We have the same problems. We have the same fears. We have the same insecurities. So um, never would have imagined 8 years ago that I would be here today and get to meet so many amazing people, and very excited about the future.
That's awesome. It's
Yeah,
completely awesome where you've come from and where you are now. So, God bless you and your team, and
thank you.
good luck in the future for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, one of the things I know we got to let you go here soon, Eric, but one of the things I did want to mention was Fast 21, FlightBridge Ed Air and Surface Transport Symposium. Um, it's just after IAC, so for one, we're tacking on to your travel
yeah,
there. We appreciate that, and I'm hoping we can get Mike Verkes to IAC, and so, but Vegas this year. What
yeah,
is how is just give us the real quick rundown of what is fast like. I'm sure some people will be, um, itching to get on a plane and get to Vegas, or to go someplace to get away. I think it might be a good opportunity. So I know if I'm vaccinated, I'm thinking about it, and maybe I can drag Doug along. We'll
yeah.
see what happens. So what's the scoop with fast?
Fast is one of those things that I don't honestly know where we came up with the idea. I mean, Mike may remember. I honestly don't have any recollection of how we made the decision, but we made the decision to have a conference, and we did Fast 18 in Nashville, and right outside of Nashville, and then we did Fast 19, same location, and had 130% increase in attendance that second year, and we were on pace to triple that attendance the in last year, right when we had to cancel. And So what is FAST? FAST is a conference where you're never going to have to choose what talk you go hear. We're all in one general session area. I try to uh, really emphasize to our team, and our team is on board. We really take it very seriously on the topics. We want experienced speakers. That doesn't mean that there are not speakers that have come that have only spoke a few times and they've hit it out of the park. So we just want relevant new content. And what makes it a little different is we make sure that the content is delivered in 20 minutes, and there's no exceptions. So we want high level critical care evidence based content that's delivered in 20 minutes, and that is super challenging, even for a very experienced speaker on some of the topics that are covered, to be able to articulate and get the points across in that amount of time. It takes a polished speaker to do that. So that's very challenging. And the feedback has been amazing. It's a very family environment. We try to intertwine inspiration, leadership, medical content, obviously in the critical care realm, and some mental health in there, and we try to really sprinkle all that stuff in. The other thing is that our vendors are in the room with us, so you're never going to have to leave that room. And that has been a big hit with the vendors. That we give them small little breaks, and obviously you have breaks at lunch. We cater the whole thing, so lunch is supplied. And so that's really the emphasis is we want to break down the barriers. You're sitting in there with physicians that you followed on social media, maybe that you look up to, and you realize really quickly that they're just like you. You're going to be sitting there with Jim DeCanto, with Jeff Jarvis, with Ritu Sani, with these doctors that you may follow, or maybe you don't even know them yet, and you meet them and you realize that they're super approachable. They're just like you. They don't want to be called doctor. They want to be called by their first name. So those barriers are down, and we don't on name tags. We don't put if you're a nurse. We don't put if you're a paramedic. We don't want credentials on there. We don't care if you're an MD. We want you to be a person, and so that has been really the emphasis. We want to inspire you, and that's the focus. So going to Las Vegas was a big decision. It was a major financial decision to do that, and we signed a 2-year agreement with Planet Hollywood Caesar Entertainment to do that. Really scary when I signed that contract, and the sky's the limit. So we're super excited about Fast 21. We're in the same mindset of you. We definitely have a backup plan, but man, I do not want to do virtual. I just don't think that is our mission. That is not what Fast is about. So it's all about the video production. We really put a lot of emphasis in the stage and the lighting and the sound, and I mean that's a huge part of our budget, and Mike does a fantastic job running that. And so it's going to be exciting.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So I think we're going to wrap things up, Eric. I know you got to get going. We truly appreciate your time joining us here for the IAC podcast.
It's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank everybody for chiming in. On behalf of Doug Wildermuth and Eric Bauer, I'm Travis Howe, saying so long. Happy holidays, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.